The wind cut across the dry canyon floor, carrying dust and heat through the open gates of the Bone Trail arena. The ground was cracked, sun-bleached, and waiting for blood. A group of seasoned riders stood near the fence line, eyes narrowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. No one spoke. Not yet. At the center of it all stood Flint, no mercy, Blackwell, silent and still, his gloved hand resting on the neck of a horse that looked like it had already lost. Rattlesoul was a joke. Everyone knew it. Skin stretched tight over bone, old scars crisscrossing his legs, one ear partially torn. He didn't move much, not from fear, but from wear. The kind of wear that only comes from being used, discarded, and forgotten. And now he was Flint's burden. A final insult. A cruel gift handed over by men who came not to ride, but to watch him fail. On the rails, Slade Hellbender leaned forward, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "They gave him Rattlesoul?" he sneered. "Hell, that horse should have been glue 5 years ago." Laughter cracked from the others. Duke Bonefire slapped the wooden post, grinning. Knox Widowmaker shook his head slowly, arms crossed. Jagger Bloodfang whistled low. "Might as well ride a corpse, Flint." Even Tex Grave Dust, the quietest of them all, smirked without a word. Braddock Doomridge remained motionless, massive, unreadable, like a statue carved from old war. But Flint didn't look at them. He didn't say a word. Instead, he adjusted the saddle on Rattlesoul's back, tugged the cinch tight, and checked the bridle with care. Not for show, for survival. There was a language between broken things, and Flint knew how to speak it. He leaned in close to the horse's ear. "They don't know what's buried inside you," he whispered. "But I do." He mounted. Slowly. The saddle let out a tired creak. For a moment, Rattlesoul didn't move. The arena fell completely silent. No jeers. No bets. No jokes. Just the wind. Then one step. Then another. The old stallion dragged himself forward, head low, shoulders tight. It wasn't pretty. But it was happening. And none of them, not Hellbender, not Widowmaker, not even Doomridge, could find a damn word to say, because something about that man and that horse felt like the beginning of something they weren't ready to witness. The trail opened wide and cruel, carved by time and hooves and pride. Jagged rocks lined the hills like broken teeth, and the heat bounced off the canyon walls, turning breath into fire. Flint, no mercy, Blackwell guided Rattlesoul with slow, deliberate reins. Each step from the old horse stirred up dust that clung to their skin like memory. They weren't fast. They weren't smooth. But they were moving. And every foot forward felt like defiance in motion. Behind them, the other riders were just beginning to mount up, louder, younger, hungrier. Slade Hellbender cracked his neck and muttered something under his breath. Knox Widowmaker adjusted his stirrups with military precision. Duke Bonefire spun his revolver once before sliding it into his saddle holster, just for show. Jagger Bloodfang shouted out toward Flint, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope you brought a shovel, Blackwell, so you can bury that bag of bones when he drops." Flint didn't turn around. His eyes were forward, but his hands tightened around the reins. Rattlesoul's ears flicked back at the sound, but his hooves didn't stop. There was something building in that silence, something Flint recognized from the old days. The way the crowd used to roar just before a ride. The kind of quiet you only get when something's about to break. He didn't need applause. He needed air in his lungs, dust in his throat, and that old fire rising again. They reached the first bend, a steep incline scattered with loose shale and narrow footing. It was where most would test their horses, push them hard, set the pace. But Flint held Rattlesoul steady. No whips, no kicks, just trust. And the horse, despite the weakness in his frame, climbed. Slowly, purposefully, like he remembered what it felt like to matter. Halfway up the slope, Flint glanced down and caught a glimpse of Braddock Doomridge watching from below. No expression, no movement. But Flint could feel it. Doomridge was measuring him. At the top of the hill, Flint stopped for a breath. The view stretched wide, nothing but dry land, twisted paths, and more pain ahead. But for a brief second, with the wind brushing across his face and Rattlesoul steady beneath him, he felt something rare. Clarity. He wasn't here for them. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here because he couldn't keep running from what broke him. Down below, the others began to climb. And behind their noise, their pride, their power, Flint knew what they didn't. The trail doesn't care who you were. It only remembers who keeps going. By midday, the sun had sharpened into a blade. Every inch of the trail burned, and the air shimmered like smoke rising off a dying fire. Flint's shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat and dust. Rattlesoul was breathing heavier now, his steps slower, but still steady. The old horse didn't ask for anything. No water, no rest. He just moved forward, one hoof at a time, as if some invisible force kept dragging him toward something bigger than both of them. Up ahead, the trail narrowed between two rock faces, a tight pass with only one rider allowed through at a time. Flint arrived first, but as he guided Rattlesoul into the gap, a sharp whistle cut through the silence. Slade Hellbender. Behind him, Nox Widowmaker and Jagger Bloodfang were already dismounted, walking their horses toward the same passage like they owned it. Slade stepped forward, arms open, a grin carved into his sunburned face. "Trail's tight, Blackwell," Slade said, voice casual but hard. "Might be safer if you let the real riders go first." Nox chuckled, and Jagger kicked at the dirt. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. Flint locked eyes with Slade for half a second, then turned his gaze back to the pass. He said nothing, just nudged Rattlesoul forward. The horse hesitated, sensing tension in the air thicker than the dust. Without a word, Slade stepped aside, but not before brushing his shoulder hard against Flint's saddle as he passed. A message. Flint didn't react. He didn't look back. But every muscle in his body stayed tight until they were clear of the gap. On the other side, he finally exhaled. The sun lit Rattlesoul's hide like polished bone. Flint leaned forward and whispered, "They want a reason to break us. Don't give it to them." As the trail opened again, distant gunfire echoed from the range, a reminder that the Bone Trail wasn't just a race, but survival. Wild dogs had been spotted. Some riders carried weapons for more than show. Flint didn't carry a gun. He didn't need one. His war wasn't out there in the hills. It was inside his chest, and it had been raging for years. Behind him, the thunder of hooves grew louder. They were gaining. And Flint knew it wasn't just a race to finish. It was a test to see who would break first. And some men came here hoping to watch him fall. The evening light stretched long and gold over the canyon, casting shadows that looked like scars across the landscape. Flint rode in silence, the rhythm of Rattlesoul's hooves like a heartbeat in dust. They were behind now, not by much, but enough. The other riders had pushed hard through the last bend. Slade, Duke, and Nox had surged forward in a show of dominance, but Flint didn't take the bait. He knew how this worked. It wasn't the first day that mattered. It was the last. Rattlesoul limped slightly on the left hind leg. Nothing serious. Not yet. Flint dismounted near a dry creek bed and knelt beside the old horse. His fingers moved carefully down the leg, checking for swelling, tension. The scar tissue there wasn't new. It had healed wrong years ago, like his own body had after the fall. He remembered that night too well. The roar of the crowd. The horse bucking beneath him. The silence when he didn't get up. They called it an accident. But Flint knew better. He'd pushed too far. Ignored the signs. Craved the win more than the warning. That mistake cost him his career. It also cost a life, a friend, a rider named Eli. Flint never spoke his name anymore. But every time he saw someone fall, every time he felt the burn in his shoulder from the old injury, the ghost rode with him. Tonight, under the fading sun, that ghost felt closer than usual. Behind him, dry twigs snapped, deliberate steps. Flint turned, hand instinctively moving to his belt, but it wasn't a threat. It was Tech's grave dust, standing just at the tree line. Silent. Watching. The old rider said nothing, just chewed a piece of sage and tilted his head toward Rattlesoul. "He won't last like this," Tex finally said, his voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. Flint stood. "He's lasted longer than he should have." "So have I." Tex nodded, almost respectfully. Then he turned and walked away, fading back into the woods like a ghost himself. Flint watched him go, uncertain if that was a warning, a challenge, or something else entirely. That night, Flint didn't sleep. He sat beside Rattlesoul, sharpening a broken stirrup with a flat stone, his eyes locked on the firelight. The others laughed and drank near their camps. But Flint kept still. He knew the next stretch would be brutal. Deep ravines, unstable cliffs, and no room for hesitation. Tomorrow wouldn't just test Rattlesoul's strength. It would test how much pain a man could carry before it buried him. The morning came brutal and fast, like it had something to prove. The air was colder now, sharp and dry, and the trail ahead was nothing but rock, incline, and the sharp drop of a ridge known as Devil's Spine. Riders called it the graveyard curve. One mistake and you'd fall far enough to meet God or the buzzards first. Flint saddled Rattlesoul in silence, his jaw tight, his hands precise. The old stallion's limp was worse today. Every step had the sound of a question. Can we still do this? Ahead, Knox Widowmaker took the lead, his horse slicing the trail with mechanical precision. Duke Bonefire followed, grinning like the whole thing was a game. Slade Hellbender lingered, letting the others clear the path before he moved in. Flint knew that trick. Slade didn't race to win, he hunted weakness. And Rattlesoul was bleeding it now, one hoof at a time. As Flint approached the ridge, the wind picked up, fierce and howling between the rocks. Rattlesoul paused, sides heaving. The edge was a narrow ledge of shale and bone-dry dust. No room to stumble. No time to second-guess. Flint dismounted, walking beside his horse, one hand on the reins, the other steadying his own breath. Below them, the canyon yawned like a throat ready to swallow everything. Halfway across, they heard it, the fast thunder of hooves behind them. Flint looked over his shoulder. Jagger Bloodfang. Riding hard, too hard, eyes locked on him like a target. Flint pulled Rattlesoul tight against the wall of rock as Jagger came close, too close, his shoulder clipping Flint's as he passed. Dirt kicked up into Flint's face. Rattlesoul flinched and nearly lost his footing. Jagger didn't look back. He just rode on, laughing like it meant nothing. But Flint felt it. That wasn't recklessness. That was intent. Someone wanted him gone. Not out of the race. Out of the picture. He steadied Rattlesoul, whispering low. "Easy, boy. They're scared. That's why they're pushing." But the fear wasn't all theirs. Flint felt something rising inside him too, a familiar pressure in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt since the day Eli died. At the end of the ridge, Flint climbed back into the saddle. He looked across the canyon, where the trail curved into a thicket of brush and shadow. The danger wasn't over. Not even close. And now, it wasn't just about proving he belonged. It was about surviving the ride. The forest swallowed them whole. The open desert gave way to a narrow trail lined with low-hanging branches and thick underbrush. Flint ducked beneath a twisted limb as Rattlesoul moved carefully through the shadowed path. The light barely cut through the trees, and the silence felt heavier here. No laughter, no taunts, just breathing. Labored. Shallow. Tired. Flint could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, steady and sharp like a drum calling him back to the past. Rattlesoul stumbled once, not badly, but enough to make Flint slide off the saddle. He walked beside the horse now, hand brushing the reins, eyes scanning every root and rock. They'd made it past Devil's Spine, but something was wrong. Not with the trail, with the quiet. No birds. No movement. Only broken twigs behind them. And it wasn't wind. A sudden rustle. Then a sharp metallic sound, a spur dragging on stone. Flint turned fast, eyes narrowing. Nock's Widowmaker emerged from the trees like a shadow given form. His face was blank, unreadable, but his hand rested casually on the leather strap of a hunting knife at his hip. "You're in our way, Blackwell," Nock said flatly. "There's men up ahead that want a clean finish. You're dragging dead weight." He nodded at Rattlesoul. "Time to stop pretending." Flint didn't flinch. "You're not just here to win," he said. "You're here to erase something." His voice was low, steady, dangerous. Nox took a step forward, and Rattlesoul let out a low, shaky breath. Not a whinny, not a cry, just presence. That old soul in him still stood tall, even in the face of threat. Flint raised a hand slowly, palm open. "Try it, and you'll find out just how dead I can get before I fall." They stared each other down in the silence of the woods, until another rider's voice echoed faintly from the trail ahead. "Tex, grave dust." Loud enough to let them know he was close. Close enough to see something if it went wrong. Nox paused, jaw clenched, then slowly backed away, disappearing between the trees without a word. Flint exhaled. He stroked Rattlesoul's neck. "You feel that?" he whispered. "They're not racing any more. They're hunting." The old horse blinked, ears twitching, but he stood tall. Not broken. Not yet. And Flint knew. If they were going to finish this ride, it would have to be as ghosts among wolves. By late afternoon, the trail opened once more to a scorched plateau. The trees behind them faded into charred stumps and broken fences, remnants of a fire long gone, but not forgotten. Flint squinted against the sun, lips cracked, throat dry. Rattlesoul's breathing had turned into a harsh rasp, but his legs kept moving. Every step looked borrowed from a younger version of himself. Flint knew that feeling too well. Ahead, in the wavering heat, the silhouettes of Duke Bonefire and Jagger Bloodfang appeared like ghosts dancing on a furnace. They weren't riding hard anymore. They were waiting. Flint slowed, instinct screaming louder than his thoughts. Rattlesoul shifted under him, uneasy. As they approached, Duke called out without turning around. "Blackwell, you should have quit back at the ridge. Ain't no points left in dragging a corpse." Behind them, a distant clatter of hooves approached. Not fast, steady, deliberate. Flint didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew it was Braddock Doomridge, the last ghost in the storm. Silent, heavy, unstoppable. Flint could feel the presence pressing in like a mountain walking behind him. Braddock wasn't here to race. He was here to witness something. Maybe the end. Maybe the moment a man burned or broke. Rattlesoul slipped again, nearly going down on one knee. Flint caught him, arms straining, breath ragged. "Come on," he growled. "We've been through worse." But had they? Deep down, he knew this was the end of the line for the horse, and maybe for himself. The canyon wasn't just killing their bodies. It was stripping them bare, down to whatever truth was left. Then a light. Not sunlight, firelight. A camp ahead, flickering behind a jagged bend. Flint blinked through the blur, and there he was, Tex Grave Dust, standing beside a small fire, rifle across his chest. No words. Just a nod. Permission. Passage. Maybe even respect. Flint led Rattlesoul the final steps to the clearing and collapsed to his knees. Tex approached slowly, placed a hand on the horse's side, then on Flint's shoulder. "You ain't won anything," he muttered. "But you ain't lost either." Flint didn't reply. He didn't need to. The ride had already said more than any man ever could. As the fire crackled in the dark, Flint looked up at the stars breaking through the smoke above. He was still breathing. And so was Rattlesoul. Flint didn't respond. He rode past them slowly, eyes locked forward. But then Jagger moved. Quick. Too quick. A glint of something in his hand, a chain, loose and rusted, swinging low. As Rattlesoul passed, Jagger snapped it across the trail, right in front of the horse's legs. The metal rang out like a gunshot. Rattlesoul reared, letting out a panicked scream, nearly throwing Flint off the saddle. Flint hit the ground hard, shoulder first. Dust exploded around him. He coughed, blinked, tried to stand, but Jagger stepped in close, grabbing his vest collar. "This ain't personal," he hissed. "You just don't belong here no more." But before Flint could answer, a thunderous crack echoed from the ridge above. A shot. Loud. Sharp. Not close, but not far. It wasn't aimed, it was a warning. Tex, grave dust. Again. Watching. Waiting. A ghost with a rifle and his own code of justice. Jagger froze. Duke tensed, hand on his belt, but no one moved further. Flint stood slowly, dusted himself off, blood at the corner of his mouth. "That's the problem with men like you," he said, staring straight at Jagger. "You think grit can be stolen. But it's not in the saddle. It's in the fall, and how many times you get back up." He walked to Rattlesoul, who stood trembling, but unbroken. Flint placed a hand on the horse's neck, feeling the tremor of old bones and the fire still burning deep inside. They weren't just surviving. They were enduring. And from now on, every step would be soaked in blood, dust, and the memory of those who tried to stop them. The final stretch before the descent into Black Hollow Pass was a wasteland of shattered stone and blistering sun. The terrain looked like it had been clawed by giants. Sharp ridges, sudden drops, and a cruel wind that howled like it wanted to tear flesh from bone. Flint rode in silence. His shoulder throbbed. His ribs ached. Rattlesoul's stride had shortened, but not stopped. They moved like two men marching to their own execution. Up ahead, Slade Hellbender waited alone. Not riding. Standing. Arms crossed, hat low over his eyes. He wasn't smirking this time. He looked like a man with unfinished business. As Flint approached, Slade stepped forward, boots crunching gravel. "You should have stayed broken, Blackwell," he said, voice quiet but sharp as barbed wire. "This ain't about pride anymore. You're dragging ghosts into a place they don't belong." Flint dismounted slowly, standing between Slade and Rattlesoul. His voice came low and even. "Maybe they don't belong. But they're still riding with me." He looked Hellbender in the eye, saw the flicker, hesitation, or maybe regret. Flint stepped closer. "What is it, Slade?" Still trying to be the man Eli would have followed. The name struck like a slap. Slade's jaw tightened. Flint didn't stop. "You're not angry at me. You're angry you didn't stop it. And now you're trying to erase what you couldn't fix." For a moment, the silence between them was deeper than the canyon below. Then, without warning, Slade stepped back. He didn't attack. He didn't speak. He just turned and walked toward his horse, mounting up like a man who'd lost a fight no one else saw. Flint didn't smile. This wasn't a victory. It was another wound, old, reopened, bleeding inside both of them. Rattlesoul snorted and shifted his weight, clearly exhausted. Flint placed a hand on his flank. "I know," he whispered. "We're almost through." He climbed back into the saddle, every muscle in his body screaming. Below them, Black Hollow Pass waited, narrow, dark, and legendary for swallowing riders whole. The sun was beginning to drop, casting long shadows across the trail. Behind him, he heard hooves. Tech's grave dust emerged slowly from a side trail, rifle strapped to his back, nodding once, silent approval. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Some men used words. Others used presence. And in that moment, Flint realized. This wasn't about finishing the race anymore. It was about finishing what life had started. Black Hollow Pass wasn't a trail. It was a punishment. The narrow canyon cut into the earth like a scar, its walls jagged and looming, as if nature itself wanted to crush anyone foolish enough to pass. Shadows swallowed light. The ground beneath Rattlesoul's hooves shifted constantly. Loose rock, slick mud, and the bones of failed riders buried under layers of dust. Every sound echoed, distorted, like the canyon was whispering warnings Flint refused to hear. Rattlesoul stumbled once, then again. Flint slid off the saddle, walking beside him, hand pressed against the old horse's chest. The heartbeat was still there, tired, fading, but fighting. Flint's own legs trembled with each step. The pain in his ribs was sharper now, his vision pulsing at the edges. He bit down hard, refused to fall. This wasn't just about grit anymore. It was about finishing, no matter the price. Morning came slow over the canyon, spilling gold over the jagged cliffs like mercy after a storm. Flint sat beside the dying fire, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes fixed on the still shape of Rattlesoul, lying just a few feet away. The old horse's chest rose shallow and slow. He was alive. Barely. But there was peace in his eyes, a kind of quiet only earned by those who'd carried more than they should have, and finished anyway. Tech's grave dust handed Flint a tin of coffee, still hot. They finished, he said. Most of 'em. Hellbender limped in third. Widowmaker pulled out. Bloodfang didn't even cross. He paused, watching the steam rise. But none of 'em got looked at the way they looked at you when you walked in on foot with a half-dead horse and fire in your damn eyes. Flint didn't speak. Just nodded, slowly, like the words were water soaking into dry ground. The finish line hadn't meant cheers. It hadn't meant a trophy. It meant they saw him. Really saw him. Not as the washed-up rider. Not as the man who fell. But as a man who stood back up, when it would have been easier to stay down. Braddock Doomridge had been there too, silent as ever, just watching, arms crossed. But when Flint passed, he tipped his hat. No words. Just truth. Rattlesoul tried to stand, legs shaking beneath him. Flint was at his side instantly, supporting the weight, whispering to him like he had since day one. "You did more than they'll ever know, old man," he said. "You carried me when I had nothing left." The horse stood, barely, but he stood. And for a few precious seconds they were both upright, breathing, broken, but undefeated. They didn't stay for the ceremony. Flint packed his gear, gave Tex a firm handshake, and walked out of that canyon the same way he'd walked into it, quiet, head high, with the ghost of something burning behind his eyes. No one stopped him. No one dared. Some men leave behind dust. Others leave behind legend. Weeks later, rumors spread of a rider and a near-dead horse crossing state lines, moving from town to town, teaching kids how to ride, fixing fences, and staying far from cameras and noise. No one knew for sure if it was Flint, Blackwell, and Rattlesoul. But those who saw them said one thing the same way every time. They moved like they still had something to prove. And nothing left to fear.